The penalties initially during Prohibition were pretty light. Initially, you might just get a fine for running a speakeasy, and of course, initially there was when Prohibition in effect, which by the way I should state, it outlawed manufacture, transportation, and sale of alcohol, but never ever outlawed the personal possession of alcohol, which is so interesting and so different from, say, the drug wars, which we're still in right now. Roll my eyes. So oftentimes it was the speakeasies themselves or the bartenders who were getting caught. They were the ones taking the penalties. And initially it might be a fine or 30 days in prison. Later on during Prohibition, you had like Herbert Hoover coming in. I should say by the 1925s or so, New York City had tried this padlocking bars, and so DC started experimenting with that as well. They'd padlock your bar for a year. And of course, oftentimes you'd simply just pick up your business and move to the next joint and reopen it because the penalties were not all that severe. And you're making so much cash money by bootlegging and serving illegal beverages that you've got all this cash untaxed. And so a lot of these people would just reopen. The one president who attempted to enforce Prohibition was Herbert Hoover, the man who's unfairly blamed for the Great Depression. And he got Congress to pass a law called the Jones 5 and 10 Act, which was 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. And $10,000 in 1929 is a lot of money. So what does everyone start doing? As opposed to beforehand, they were all just pleading and paying their fines or 30 days in prison. Instead, they start demanding jury trials. And of course, that completely gums up the works for the legal system. You've got so many people getting caught and then demanding jury trials because the penalty is so severe that, you may as well hire an attorney and fight it, So, yeah, it just increased the cynicism of the public, just seeing how much the public was disregarding Prohibition and how many people, all this stuff's getting publicized about how many people are breaking the law and now how many trials are going on, how much is gumming up the legal system. So the public by the late 1920s was becoming super cynical towards Prohibition because obviously there was not enough money in the world to enforce this thing. So it's so interesting with Congress. Congress had passed the 18th Amendment and sent it on to the states. And of course, also Congress has to create the budget for the Prohibition Bureau to enforce Prohibition. And yet most of Congress is still drinking, both the congressmen and the senators, which is so amazing. And it's a huge amount of hypocrisy there. So they employ a specific there's a number of bootleggers that are out there, but the key one who works for Congress is named George Cassiday, better known as the man in the green hat. So he began working for Congress in 1920 when a man asked him, hey, could you supply, there's a couple congressmen, Southerners, who would like to get a couple pints of whiskey. Do you think you can supply them? And he was like, sure. So he brought it to them. And after that, he became the go-to person in Congress. So all these congressmen just started coming to him. They actually gave him an office in the Cannon House office building in the basement. And all the congressmen would drop by to play poker. George Cassiday was from West Virginia. He had fought during World War I. He was a tanker and had a third grade education. And yet he had a great social skills. So all these congressmen loved hanging out with George. So they'd go down to the basement, play poker with him. Every day he'd bring a suitcase full of liquor. You were only searched when you left the building. And of course he had brought all his liquor into the building. So he had an empty suitcase every day. In 1925, after 5 years, he finally gets arrested, caught as he's going into into the Cannon House office building, and was given a 90-day jail sentence. And after that, he returned, but this time he went over to the Senate side of Congress because senators were more discreet. So he got an office in their building, and then the senators would send their staff person, like their secretary, over to pick up the supply. So he had remarked at one point that there was a secretary who'd come by bringing a note saying, I'm looking for library materials. That was a little code word. And he said, yes, I've got just the book for you, and meaning the kind of whiskey that he wanted. So it was so funny. He got caught for the second time in 1930, in February. And at that point, the Washington Post approached him about doing an exclusive series of articles, which were published in October of 1930, 6 front page articles. The last one of these 6 front page articles was published 1 week before the midterm election. And again, the Great Depression is going on here, and he totally spills the beans on Congress. The only thing he doesn't do is name names. But otherwise, he talked about bootlegging for 10 years. He talked about where he was supplied for alcohol. How he'd go up on the train to Newark, Delaware, to Philadelphia, or Baltimore, or New York City, and sometimes brought multiple people in suitcases, bringing all this liquor back from his supply chain. And then how he'd get into Congress and who his customers were, etc. And he estimated that in his experience, since he knew all these congressmen, that 4 out of 5 congressmen, do the math, 80% of congressmen, drank during Prohibition. I mean, he was on first name basis with all these guys. There was another op-ed published around that same time where this one columnist had stated that the number of senators who did not drink could fit into a single cab. And I did the math on that one. It was 3 senators. You had Morris Shepherd from Texas and then the 2 senators from Utah. That was it. So out of 96 senators at the time, 93 drank. I mean, incredible.